Settle in tonight as we journey back to a world where the sound of bronze-tipped spears striking shields echoed across sun-baked valleys, where the very air seemed to hum with an intensity it would be difficult for us to comprehend today. We're traveling to ancient Sparta, not the romanticized realm of movie heroes, but the complex, often harsh reality of a society built entirely around the machinery of war. Before we begin this gentle exploration together, if you enjoy what we do here on these quiet historical journeys, feel free to like the video and subscribe to join our community of fellow night wanderers. And I'm always curious, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. There's something wonderfully comforting about knowing we're all sharing these moments of quiet, discovery across time zones and continents. Now, dim the lights, adjust your pillow, and let yourself sink into the past. Tonight, we'll walk alongside those who lived in the shadow of Spartan power, not the celebrated warriors themselves, but the forgotten majority who made their society possible. We'll meet the helots, the state-owned serfs whose labor fed the war machine. We'll follow the perioikoi, the craftsmen and merchants who lived as permanent outsiders in their own communities. We'll whisper about the krypteia, the shadowy young Spartans who moved through darkness with deadly purpose. And finally, we'll cross the hills to Athens, where a different kind of life unfolded under different stars. These are stories of survival, of adaptation, of finding small moments of humanity within systems that often seem designed to crush the human spirit. Yet even in the harshest circumstances, people found ways to live, to love, to hope, and to endure. Let their quiet resilience guide you toward your own peaceful rest tonight. Verse 1. The daily life of a helot. The rooster's crow cuts through the pre-dawn darkness, but it's not a sound of hope or new beginnings. It's a summons to another day of careful survival. You are a helot, a word that carries the weight of generations, passed down like an inheritance no one would choose to receive. Your great-grandfather was a helot, and his great-grandfather before him, stretching back to some distant conquest when your people's land became Spartan land, and your people became Spartan property. The word itself, helot, comes from the Greek word meaning captive, though you've never known captivity in the way we might imagine it. There are no chains on your wrists, no bars on your dwelling. Your bondage is more complete than that, woven into the very fabric of existence itself. You belong to the Spartan state the way a plow belongs to a farmer, the way a ship belongs to its captain. You are property, but property that thinks, feels, dreams, and suffers. Your home sits low against the earth, walls of sun-dried mud brick that absorb the day's heat and release it slowly through the cool nights. The roof is simple wooden beams supporting clay tiles that sing softly when rain falls upon them. Inside, the floor is packed earth, swept clean each morning with a broom made from bundled twigs. There's a small hearth near the center, its smoke finding its way out through a simple hole in the roof. The furnishings are sparse but functional. A wooden table worn smooth by generations of use, sleeping pallets stuffed with straw, a few clay vessels for storing grain and oil. The dawn light filtering through your single small window reveals the tools of your existence, the same tools your father used, and his father before him. A bronze-tipped plow, its wooden handle polished by countless hands. Sickles for the harvest, their curved blades kept sharp against whetstones that have grown thin with use. Baskets woven from river reeds, their patterns passed down through whispered instructions from mother to daughter. These objects are not just tools, they are the infrastructure of survival, each one representing the delicate balance between usefulness and expendability that defines your entire existence. You step outside into air that still holds the night's coolness, knowing it will soon give way to the relentless heat of the Mediterranean sun. The landscape stretches before you in all directions, olive groves marching up hillsides in neat rows, their silver-green leaves catching the early light. Barley fields that will soon need harvesting, the grain already beginning to bow under its own weight. Vineyards where grape clusters hang heavy and dark, almost ready for the pressing that will produce the wine that graces Spartan tables you will never sit at. This is the Eurotas River Valley, some of the richest agricultural land in all of Greece. The soil here is deep and dark, enriched by countless generations of floods that have deposited their fertile gifts across the valley floor. It's land that could support a comfortable life, perhaps even prosperity, under different circumstances. But these are not different circumstances. This is Sparta, and you are a helot. The work begins before the sun fully clears the eastern mountains. In the barley fields, you move with the rhythm of generations, your sickle cutting through stalks with practiced precision. Each motion is economical. Purposeful wasted energy is a luxury you cannot afford. The work is methodical. Cut, gather, bind, stack. The bundles of grain accumulate slowly, like the hours of your life, each one bringing you closer to the end of the day, but no closer to freedom. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the heat that will be your constant companion until evening. You pause occasionally to drink from a clay jug filled with water that tastes of the earth it came from. The water is warm now, but it's wet, and that's what matters. Around you, other helots work their own sections of field, close enough to see, but too far for easy conversation. This isolation is not accidental, it's policy. Helots who gather and talk might plan. Helots who plan might resist. But resistance has been tried before, and the stories of those attempts are passed down in whispers, cautionary tales that serve both as inspiration and warning. The Great Helot Revolt, generations past, when desperation finally outweighed fear and thousands rose up against their masters. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed possible that the world might change. But the world did not change. The revolt was crushed with a thoroughness that still echoes in the careful way helots move through their daily lives. The survivors learned that hope, while impossible to kill entirely, must be rationed like water in a drought. Midday brings a brief respite. You seek what shade you can find, perhaps under an olive tree, whose gnarled branches have witnessed centuries of similar scenes. The bread you carry is coarse, made from barley flour mixed with water and whatever herbs you could gather. It's filling without being satisfying, nourishment without pleasure. You eat slowly, making it last, knowing that the afternoon's work will demand every bit of energy this simple meal can provide. The afternoon heat is brutal. The sun, a relentless presence that turns the air itself into something thick and oppressive. Your tunic, woven from rough wool and faded to a color somewhere between brown and gray, clings to your skin. Sweat runs down your back, stinging small cuts and scratches accumulated through days of manual labor. Your hands, calloused and scarred, continue their work with mechanical precision, even as your mind drifts to thoughts of evening, of rest, of the small comforts that make survival bearable. But even these moments of mental escape are shadowed by awareness. Always, there is the possibility that today might be the day a young Spartan warrior decides you look too strong, too confident, too much like someone who might cause trouble. The krypteia, the secret police of Sparta, move through the helot communities like wolves through sheep pastures, and their visits rarely end well for those they notice. You've learned to make yourself unremarkable, not so slow that you appear lazy, that would draw attention, not so fast that you appear ambitious, that would draw different attention, but attention nonetheless. You've learned to keep your eyes down when Spartans pass, to make your body language speak of submission and acceptance. You've learned to wear your servitude like a garment, complete and convincing. Yet underneath this carefully maintained exterior, something else persists. Perhaps it's not hope exactly. Hope is too dangerous, too likely to lead to disappointment or worse. But there's something else, harder to name. A stubborn thread of selfhood that refuses to be completely erased. You are more than your function, more than your economic value to the Spartan state. You have memories that belong to you alone, a taste of wild honey found in a hollow tree, the sound of your mother singing old songs in the evenings, the feeling of cool water on your feet when you cross streams. These private moments are your true possessions, the only wealth that cannot be confiscated or redistributed. They exist in the spaces between commands, in the brief intervals when no one is watching, in the quiet hours after the day's work is done. They are small and fragile, but they are yours. Evening finally arrives with a gradual cooling of the air and the welcome sight of the sun settling toward the western hills. The day's harvest is gathered, counted, recorded. Most of it will go to feed Spartan citizens and their families. Some will be sold in markets to generate wealth that will never touch your hands. A small portion carefully calculated to be sufficient for survival, but insufficient for prosperity, will be distributed among the helot families who produced it. You make your way home as shadows lengthen across the valley. Other helots move along the same paths, all of you sharing the peculiar solidarity of those who understand survival from the inside. Words are few, but glances speak volumes. A slight nod acknowledges another successful day of invisibility. A brief smile celebrates the simple fact of continued existence. Back in your dwelling, the evening meal is simple but precious. Perhaps there's a bit of cheese saved from yesterday. Maybe some olives, their oil adding richness to the coarse bread. If you're fortunate, there might be a small fish caught in the few moments between the end of work and the beginning of darkness. The food is eaten slowly, mindfully. Each bite is both sustenance and small rebellion against a system that would reduce you to mere function. As darkness settles over the valley, you lie on your straw pallet and listen to the sounds of night. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. Closer, the gentle breathing of your family members as they settle into sleep. Above, through the smoke hole in your roof, stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, the same stars that shine on Spartan citizens in their comfortable homes. The same stars that shone on your ancestors before the conquest. The same stars that will shine long after all of this has crumbled to dust. In these quiet moments, you exist simply as a human being under an endless sky. The categories that define your day's helot, property, laborer, seem suddenly arbitrary. Temporary constructions that have no power over the part of you that thinks and dreams and wonders. Tomorrow will bring another day of careful survival, another performance of submission, another small victory in the ongoing war of endurance. But tonight, in the space between waking and sleeping, you are simply yourself. And that self, despite everything, endures. Verse 2. The story of a perioikoi, the bronze, glows warm in the lamplight, its surface reflecting the gentle flames that dance in clay vessels filled with olive oil. Your workshop exists in that liminal space between day and night, between the public world of commerce and the private world of craft. Here, surrounded by the tools of your trade and the familiar scent of metal and fire, you occupy a position that most of the ancient world would never understand. Neither slave nor citizen, neither completely free nor entirely bound. You are perioikoi literally, those who dwell around, and the very name captures the essence of your existence. You live around Sparta, but not within it. You contribute to Sparta, but do not control it. You benefit from Sparta's power, but have no voice in how that power is wielded. You exist in the spaces between categories, in the margins of a society that has no room for ambiguity, except where it serves the state's purposes. Your dwelling sits in one of the small communities that dot the landscape around Sparta proper perhaps, Chithium near the coast, where ships bring precious metals and exotic materials, or Silesia in the northern hills, where the stone is particularly good for construction. These towns have their own rhythms, their own small hierarchies, their own quiet dignities. They are not Sparta, but they are Spartan in the way that moons belong to planets, bound by invisible forces, essential but subordinate. The workshop itself tells the story of generations of skilled hands. The walls are lined with tools that have been passed down from father to son, each one shaped by use into perfect efficiency. Hammers with wooden handles worn smooth as silk, their bronze heads bearing the small dents and scratches that speak of countless hours of patient work. Tongs for handling hot metal, their jaws precisely aligned for gripping. Files and rasps for finishing work, their surfaces carefully maintained to preserve their cutting ability. In one corner stands the forge, its hearth lined with fire-resistant stones that have withstood the heat of countless blazes. The bellows beside it are made from ox hide, their wooden nozzles directing air with the precision of a master's breath. This is technology that has remained essentially unchanged for centuries, not because it is primitive, but because it is perfect for its purpose. The relationship between fire, air, and metal follows laws older than human memory, and your craft consists of understanding those laws well enough to bend them to your will. The work begins early, as it always has. You select a piece of raw bronze, feeling its weight in your hands, reading the story of its composition in the way it responds to your touch. This particular piece came from Cyprus, traded through a chain of merchants and middlemen before arriving in your workshop. It carries within it the marriage of copper and tin, metals that may have been mined on opposite sides of the Mediterranean before being brought together in the crucibles of distant smiths. The process of transformation is both ancient ritual and practical necessity. The metal must be heated until it glows like a small sun, its surface shimmering with the heat that will make it malleable. The forge roars to life under the steady rhythm of the bellows, flames dancing in patterns that seem almost alive. The bronze begins to respond, its color shifting from the dull brown of cold metal to the warm glow of heated copper. This is the moment when craft becomes art, when the accumulated knowledge of generations flows through your hands into the waiting metal. The hammer falls with practiced precision, each blow carefully calculated to shape rather than destroy. The sound rings through the workshop, a clear, musical note that speaks of metal yielding to skilled force. Gradually, the formless ingot begins to take shape under your hands, becoming what it was always meant to become. Today, you are making spear points, not the crude, functional weapons that foot soldiers might carry, but the perfectly balanced, beautifully finished points that will grace the spears of Spartan warriors. Each one must be identical to its fellows, yet each one must also be perfect in its own right. The blade must taper to a point sharp enough to penetrate bronze armor, yet strong enough not to break on impact. The socket must fit precisely onto the wooden shaft, creating a union so perfect that spear and point become a single weapon. The work requires absolute concentration, a moment's inattention, a single poorly placed hammer blow, and hours of careful work can be ruined. But there is also a meditative quality to the process, a rhythm that seems to synchronize your breathing with the bellows, your heartbeat with the hammer's fall. Time becomes fluid in the workshop, marked not by the passage of hours, but by the gradual transformation of raw material into finished goods. As the morning progresses, other sounds begin to filter into the workshop. The voices of merchants setting up their stalls in the small market square, the lowing of cattle being driven to pasture, the distant sound of children playing in the streets. These sounds create a backdrop of normalcy, a reminder that life continues its ancient patterns, even in the shadow of Sparta's military might. Your position as perioikoi grants you certain privileges that helots can only dream of. You own your workshop, your tools, your dwelling. You can accumulate wealth, though you must always be careful not to accumulate too much prosperity that becomes too visible as a way of attracting unwanted attention. You can travel within limits to trade with other craftsmen or to acquire materials. You can even bear arms, though only in service to the state and never in opposition to it. But these privileges come with their own burdens. You exist at the pleasure of the Spartan state, and that pleasure can be withdrawn at any moment without explanation or appeal. You have no vote in the assembly, no voice in the decisions that shape your world. You are expected to serve when called upon, to contribute when required, to remain silent when policies are debated, that will affect your life and the lives of your children. The spear point takes shape under your hands, its surface now bearing the subtle patterns that mark it as your work. Every craftsman has his signature, small details that identify the maker to those who know how to look. Perhaps it's a particular way of finishing the edges, or a specific proportion between blade and socket. These signatures are not mere vanity. They are a form of quiet pride, a way of saying, I made this and I made it well. The afternoon brings visitors to the workshop. A Spartan warrior, young and bearing the distinctive red cloak that marks his status, enters with the casual arrogance of someone who has never questioned his right to be wherever he chooses to be. He examines the finished spear points with the eye of someone who understands their function, testing their balance, checking their edges. His approval is not expressed in words. Spartans are famously economical with praise, but in the small nod that indicates the work meets his standards. Payment, when it comes, is fair but not generous. The Spartan state has no interest in enriching its perioikoi beyond what is necessary to maintain their loyalty and ensure their continued service. The transaction is recorded in the careful script you learned from your father, marking another entry in the ledger that chronicles your life's work. These records are more than mere accounting. They are proof of your usefulness, insurance against the day when someone might question your right to exist in this precarious space between slavery and citizenship. Evening brings a different kind of work. With the day's commissions completed, you turn to personal projects, perhaps a bronze mirror for your wife, its surface polished to perfection and decorated with subtle engravings that will catch and reflect the light. Or maybe a small figurine, a goddess or hero whose image will grace your household shrine. These pieces are not for sale, not for trade, but for the satisfaction of creation itself. The work on personal pieces has a different quality than commissioned work. There is less pressure, more room for experimentation, more opportunity to let your hands explore possibilities that commercial work rarely allows. Here, you can indulge in the pure joy of craftsmanship, the deep satisfaction that comes from making something beautiful simply because beauty has value in itself. As darkness settles over the workshop, you bank the fires in the forge, careful to preserve the coals for tomorrow's work. The tools are cleaned and put away, each one returned to its proper place. The workspace is swept clean, metal filings gathered and saved. Even the smallest scraps of bronze have value, and waste is a luxury that perioikoi cannot afford. The evening meal is taken in the small courtyard behind your dwelling, where your wife has prepared a simple but satisfying dinner. Perhaps there is fish from the morning's catch, seasoned with herbs from the garden she tends with such care. Bread, still warm from the clay oven, its crust golden and crisp. Olives from the tree that shades the courtyard, their oil rich and green. Wine, diluted with water in the proper proportions, its warmth spreading through your tired body. The conversation is quiet, domestic, centered on the small events that make up a life. Your wife speaks of the neighbors, of the children who played in the streets, of the merchant who brought news from other towns. You share the day's work, the challenges overcome, the small satisfactions earned. These conversations are precious. They belong to you in a way that your public life never can. Your children, when they appear, bring their own kind of joy and worry. They are free in ways you never were, but they are also bound by limitations you cannot change. They will inherit your skills, your position, your careful balance between usefulness and invisibility. They will learn, as you learned, to read the subtle signs that indicate when to speak and when to remain silent, when to step forward and when to step back. The night is warm, and you sit for a while in the courtyard, looking up at the stars that wheel overhead in their eternal patterns. These same stars shone on your grandfather when he was young, and on his grandfather before him. They will shine on your children and their children, long after your own name has been forgotten. There is comfort in this continuity, in the knowledge that some things endure beyond the reach of earthly power. In the distance, you can hear the sounds of Sparta itself, the calls of the night watch, the distant music from some celebration, the general murmur of a city that never quite sleeps. These sounds remind you of your place, in the larger scheme of things, of the delicate balance that keeps your world stable. You are part of Sparta's strength, but you are not Sparta itself. You serve its purposes, but you do not shape its destiny. Yet in the quiet moments, surrounded by the fruits of your labor and the love of your family, there is a different kind of satisfaction. You have carved out a space for yourself in a world that offers few such spaces. You have found dignity in work, honor in craftsmanship, and meaning in the simple act of creating something lasting from raw materials. These victories may be small, but they are yours. The bronze pieces you have made will outlast you, carrying forward the skill of your hands and the patience of your heart. In some distant future, when the political arrangements of your time have crumbled to dust, as you prepare for sleep, you touch the small bronze amulet you wear around your neck, a piece you made years ago in the early days of your mastery. It bears the mark of your inexperience, small imperfections that a more skilled hand would have avoided. But it also bears the mark of your hope, your determination to excel, your belief that the work itself had value regardless of the circumstances that shaped it. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new commissions, new opportunities to prove your worth in a world that takes that worth for granted. But tonight, in the space between waking and sleeping, you rest in the knowledge that you have honored the ancient contract between craftsman and material, between human skill and the raw stuff of the world. That contract transcends politics, outlasts empires, and endures long after the names of kings and warriors have been forgotten. Verse 3. A deep dive into the krypteia. The moon is new tonight, which means the darkness is complete thick as black wool, pressing against your eyes with an almost physical weight. This is the darkness you have learned to move through like a second nature, the darkness that has become your closest companion and most trusted ally. You are krypteia, one of the hidden ones, and tonight, like so many nights before, you will become something that exists between shadow and substance, between human and specter. The preparation began hours ago, in the small sanctuary outside Sparta, where young warriors like yourself gather for rituals that have no names and leave no records. Here, in a grove sacred to Artemis the Huntress, you perform the ceremonies that transform ordinary young men into instruments of state terror. The rituals are ancient, their origins lost in the mists of Spartan prehistory, but their purpose remains crystal clear: to create hunters of men, protectors of the system, guardians of the delicate balance that keeps helot millions in subjugation to Spartan thousands. Your body bears the marks of preparation. Oil has been rubbed into your skin, not the perfumed oils that wealthy citizens use for luxury, but a mixture of olive oil and soot that will help you blend with the darkness. Your hair has been bound back with a simple leather cord, every strand secured so that nothing will catch the wind or brush against branches to betray your presence. Your feet are bare, their soles toughened by months of training on every type of terrain, sensitive now to the subtlest changes in ground texture that might indicate safe passage or hidden danger. The weapons you carry are few, but perfect. A short sword, its blade darkened with lamp black so that no stray moonbeam or starlight will reflect from its surface. A knife worn at your belt, its edge honed to a sharpness that could split a hair. These tools are extensions of your body now, so familiar that you handle them without conscious thought, as naturally as you might move your own hands. But perhaps your most important weapon is something that cannot be seen or touched, the absolute confidence that what you do tonight serves the greater good of Sparta. This certainty has been carefully cultivated through years of education, through countless lessons in which the instructors make clear that helots are not quite human in the way that Spartans are human. They are dangerous, cunning, always plotting rebellion. They are numerous, and their numbers make them a constant threat to the natural order that places Spartans at the apex of creation. Left unchecked, they would rise up and destroy everything that makes Sparta great. The territory you patrol tonight is familiar ground, mapped in your memory through weeks of careful observation. You know which paths the helots use when they move between settlements. You know where the young men gather to talk in voices they think are too quiet to be overheard. You know which families have produced individuals who show signs of leadership, intelligence, or most dangerous of all, pride. Movement through this landscape requires skills that few humans ever develop. You must read the ground with your feet, feeling for loose stones that might shift and clatter, for soft earth that might hold the impression of your passage, for the subtle changes in texture that indicate the difference between safe paths and treacherous ones. Your breathing must be controlled, so quiet that it blends with the natural sounds of night, the whisper of wind through grass, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft rustling of small creatures moving through underbrush. The darkness that conceals you also reveals things that daylight hides. Sounds carry differently at night, and you have learned to interpret the acoustic landscape with the precision of a master musician reading notation. The distant bark of a dog tells you that someone is moving along a path a half-mile away. The sudden silence of crickets indicates that another person has passed through an area recently enough to disturb the natural rhythms of night. The faint scent of wood smoke on the breeze reveals the location of dwellings that might not be visible even in daylight. Tonight's mission is surveillance, rather than action watching, listening, gathering the information that feeds back into the vast network of knowledge that allows Sparta to maintain control over a population that outnumbers its citizens by more than 7 to 1. You position yourself on a small rise overlooking a helot settlement, invisible in the shadow of an ancient olive tree whose gnarled branches have witnessed centuries of similar scenes. Below, the settlement appears peaceful, almost pastoral. Small dwellings cluster together like sleeping animals, their mud brick walls pale in the starlight. Thin columns of smoke rise from a few chimneys, indicating families still awake, perhaps sharing evening meals or tending to sick children. Gardens spread between the houses' small plots, where helots grow vegetables to supplement their meager rations, where children play during daylight hours, where women gather to share news and companionship. But your trained eyes see deeper than surface tranquility. You note which houses show signs of recent construction or repair prosperity among helots, must be monitored, and, if necessary, curtailed. You observe the patterns of movement between dwellings, mapping the social networks that connect families and individuals. You listen to conversations carried on the night air, parsing words and tones for signs of discontent, planning, or resistance. The helots below go about their evening routines, unaware that they are being watched, but their behavior betrays the constant undercurrent of tension that defines their existence. Conversations stop abruptly when footsteps approach. Glances are exchanged that speak volumes without words. Children are called inside earlier than comfort would dictate, mothers casting nervous looks toward the darkness beyond their doorways. This nervous awareness is itself a tool of control, as effective as any weapon in maintaining the balance of power. Helots who know they might be watched at any moment are helots who modify their behavior, who think twice before speaking freely, who hesitate before taking actions that might be interpreted as threatening. The krypteia exists as much in the imagination of the helots as in the physical reality of young Spartans moving through darkness. Hours pass with the patience that has been drilled into you through months of training. A krypteia who cannot wait motionless for entire nights is a krypteia who will fail in his mission and endanger the state. You have learned to exist in a state of relaxed alertness, aware of everything around you, while conserving energy for the moment when action might be required. Your breathing slows to match the rhythms of deep sleep, but your mind remains sharp as the blade at your side. The information you gather tonight will be added to files that contain the detailed histories of helot families going back generations. Which bloodlines have produced troublemakers in the past? Which individuals show signs of intelligence or leadership ability? Which young men might, if left alone, grow into the kind of charismatic figures who could inspire others to resist? This knowledge is power, the power to nip rebellion in the bud, to remove threats before they can fully develop, to maintain the delicate equilibrium that keeps Sparta stable and strong. Near midnight, you observe something that requires closer investigation. A small group of young helot men has gathered near the settlement's edge, speaking in voices so low that their words are lost in the night air. Their body language suggests intensity, urgency, perhaps conspiracy. You begin to move closer, flowing through the darkness with the liquid grace of a hunting cat. The approach requires absolute precision. Each step must be placed with perfect accuracy, each movement coordinated to avoid creating any disturbance that might alert your targets. You use every piece of cover rocks, bushes, the shadows cast by buildings, to mask your advance. The skills you employ tonight are the same ones your ancestors used to hunt deer and wild boar in the mountains of Laconia, refined now for hunting a different kind of prey. As you draw nearer, fragments of conversation begin to reach your ears. The words are careful, coded, but your training has taught you to read between the lines of helot speech. They are discussing work assignments, but in terms that suggest dissatisfaction with their treatment. They mention names of overseers, but in tones that carry more than mere identification. Most importantly, they speak of when things change, a phrase that could be innocent, but might also indicate planning for some future action. The decision you face now is one that every krypteia must make countless times, whether to act immediately or to continue gathering information. Immediate action would eliminate any potential threat these young men might represent, but it would also end your opportunity to learn more about their network, their plans, their connections to other helots who might share their dangerous thoughts. The choice requires balancing immediate security against long-term intelligence gathering, weighing certain prevention against possible greater discoveries. Tonight, you choose patience. The conversation continues, and gradually a clearer picture emerges. These young men are not plotting immediate rebellion, but they are sharing information, building networks, creating the social connections that could someday become the foundation for organized resistance. They speak of relatives in other settlements, of work conditions in different parts of Laconia, of stories they have heard about helots in distant regions who have attempted to improve their circumstances. This intelligence is valuable precisely because it reveals the early stages of what could develop into a more serious threat. By identifying these individuals now, by understanding their connections and motivations, the Spartan state can take preventive measures. Perhaps their work assignments will be changed to separate them geographically. Perhaps their families will be relocated to different regions. Perhaps some of them will simply disappear one night, their absence serving as a warning to others who might harbor similar thoughts. The gathering breaks up near dawn, the young men dispersing to their homes with the careful casualness of people who know they must appear innocent, even when they feel anything but. You remain in position long enough to ensure that no one doubles back, that no additional meetings take place, that the settlement returns to its normal patterns of rest before the day's labor begins. The journey back to Sparta takes place in the gray half-light of dawn, when the world exists in that liminal space between night and day. You move more quickly now, but no less carefully. Dawn is a dangerous time for krypteia, when increased visibility makes concealment more difficult, but full daylight has not yet arrived to provide complete cover for normal movement. Back in the city, you make your report to the ephors, the elected officials who coordinate the activities of the krypteia and integrate intelligence gathering with broader state policy. Your words are precise, factual, free of interpretation or emotion. You describe what you saw, what you heard, what you concluded from your observations. The decision about how to act on this information will be made by others, by men whose responsibility it is to weigh such intelligence against the broader needs of the state. The debriefing complete, you return to your normal life as a young Spartan citizen. You join your age mates for the morning meal, participate in military training, attend to the various duties that fill a warrior's day. To the outside observer, you appear no different from any other young man preparing for full citizenship. The night's activities leave no visible mark, create no change in your public demeanor. But something has changed, something subtle and internal. Each mission adds another layer to your understanding of what it means to serve Sparta, what it costs to maintain the system that produces warriors like yourself. You have seen fear in the eyes of people who have done nothing wrong except be born into the wrong social category. You have felt the weight of absolute power over the lives and deaths of human beings who cannot defend themselves against you. These experiences accumulate like sediment, creating a psychological landscape that is difficult to map or understand. Part of you takes pride in your skills, in your service to the state, in your role as guardian of Spartan supremacy. Another part wonders about the young helots you watch tonight, about their dreams and fears, about what their lives might have been under different circumstances. But such thoughts are dangerous, not to be pursued too far or examined too closely. The krypteia exists to serve Sparta, not to question Sparta. Your duty is to be an instrument of state policy, not to evaluate that policy's wisdom or justice. The system that created you and trained you and sent you into the darkness depends on your unquestioning loyalty, your absolute commitment to the proposition that Spartan dominance is natural, necessary, and good. As sleep finally claims you in the early hours of morning, you rest with the satisfaction of duty performed and service rendered. Tomorrow night may bring new missions, new opportunities to protect the state from those who would challenge its authority. You are ready for whatever may come, trained and prepared, and utterly committed to the role that history has assigned you. The dreams that come are filled with darkness and movement, with the whispered conversations of people who live always in fear, with the weight of decisions that shape the lives of others in ways they will never understand. These dreams are the price of service, the cost of being krypteia. They are dreams you have learned to carry without complaint, part of the burden that comes with being one of Sparta's hidden guardians. In the deepest hours of sleep, when consciousness releases its grip on identity and purpose, you exist simply as a young man who has seen too much and carries too many secrets. But even then, even in the vulnerability of dreams, you remain what Sparta has made you, a guardian of the darkness, a keeper of the balance, a silent protector of the order that defines your world. Verse 4, a contrasting look at the life of a citizen farmer in democratic Athens. The olive tree's shadow has shifted noticeably since morning, marking the passage of another day in the rhythm that has governed human life since. The first farmer learned to read the seasons in the movement of sun and stars. You pause in your work, wiping sweat from your brow with the back of your hand, and look out across the slopes of Hymettus, where your small farm spreads like a patchwork quilt across the rocky hillsides of Attica. Here, just a few days' journey from Sparta, but a world away in spirit, the very air seems to breathe differently. There is something in the quality of light, perhaps, or in the way voices carry across the terraced fields, a sense of openness, of possibility, of conversations that need not be whispered or coded or carefully modulated to avoid unwanted attention. This is Athens, or rather, this is the countryside that feeds Athens and sends its sons to defend her, where citizenship is not a privilege reserved for a warrior elite, but a birthright shared among all free men born of Athenian parents. Your farm is small, perhaps 20 acres of hillside your grandfather cleared with his own hands, building the stone walls that still mark its boundaries. The soil is thin here, rocky and challenging, but it is yours in a way that goes deeper than legal ownership. Every stone in these walls was placed by someone who bore your name. Every olive tree was planted by hands that share your blood. Every terraced slope represents generations of patient labor, of families who understood that the land gives back only what is invested in it. with interest compounded over decades rather than seasons. The morning's work began before dawn, as it always does during the harvest season. The olive trees, gnarled and ancient as wisdom itself, hung heavy with fruit that glistened like small moons in the early light. These trees are older than memory. Some may have been young when your great-grandfather was a boy, others perhaps older still. They have weathered droughts and floods, wars and invasions, the rise and fall of tyrants, and the birth of democracy. They stand now as living testaments to the patient endurance of those who work the earth. The harvest requires its own particular rhythm, a dance between human hands and the natural cycles that govern when fruit is ready to release its hold on the branch. Too early, and the olives will not have developed their full richness. Too late, and they will begin to spoil or fall to feed the mice and birds that consider themselves shareholders in every harvest. The timing must be perfect, and that timing cannot be determined by calendars or calculations. It requires the accumulated wisdom that comes only from years of observation, from understanding the subtle signs that indicate when the moment has arrived. You work alongside your wife and children, your elderly father, who moves more slowly now, but whose eye for the perfect moment of ripeness remains sharper than your own. The conversation flows as naturally as the work itself plans for the winter months. News from neighbors, discussion of which fields might need additional terracing before the spring planting. These are the conversations of people who share not just labor but destiny, whose individual success or failure affects the whole family's prospects. The baskets fill gradually with the patient accumulation that characterizes all agricultural work. Each olive represents a small victory, a tiny confirmation that this year's gamble against weather and pests and the 1,000 other uncertainties that can destroy a farmer's hopes has paid off. The fruit varies in size and color, some green and firm, destined for the table, others darker and softer, perfect for the oil that will light your lamps and flavor your food through the long winter months ahead. As the sun climbs higher, the sounds of the countryside create a symphony of rural life that would be incomprehensible to city dwellers. It speaks to you in the familiar language of home. The lowing of cattle in distant pastures, the bleating of goats picking their way along rocky paths, the calls of shepherds moving their flocks from one grazing area to another. Somewhere in the distance, the rhythmic thudding of mallets tells you that a neighbor is processing his own olive harvest, extracting the precious oil that represents months of careful cultivation condensed into liquid gold. The work pauses for the midday meal, taken in the shade of the largest olive tree, whose branches provide relief from the Mediterranean sun that by noon has become a force to be reckoned with. Your wife has prepared the simple but satisfying fare that sustains farming families, bread baked from wheat grown in your own fields, cheese made from the milk of your goats, olives from last year's harvest, and wine from grapes that grow on the terraced slopes above the olive groves. This meal is more than mere sustenance. It is a moment of communion with the land that supports you and the family that defines you. The bread carries the flavor of soil and season, of grain that grew in fields you know as intimately as your own children. The cheese speaks of patient mornings spent learning the moods and needs of animals that depend on your care. The wine holds the memory of hot afternoons spent tending vines, of harvest celebrations when the whole community came together to transform grapes into the liquid that would carry the joy of autumn through the darkness of winter. The conversation during these meals often turns to matters beyond the immediate concerns of farming. Your eldest son, approaching his 18th birthday, speaks of his upcoming military service, of the training that will prepare him to defend Athens against her enemies. Your daughter, intelligent and curious, asks questions about the world beyond the farm, about the ships that bring exotic goods to the Piraeus, about the philosophers and poets whose words are discussed even in rural communities. These discussions reflect something that would be impossible under the Spartan system, the assumption that ordinary citizens have not just the right, but the responsibility to think about public affairs. to form opinions about policy, to participate in the democratic process that governs their city. Your son will not simply serve as a soldier. He will vote in the assembly, serve on juries, perhaps even hold public office. Your daughter, while excluded from formal political participation, will raise children who expect to have their voices heard in the councils of state. The afternoon brings different work, but work that carries the same satisfaction of contributing to something larger than individual survival. Today, you are repairing the stone wall that marks the boundary between your farm and your neighbors, work that benefits both properties and strengthens the community bonds that hold rural society together. The stones are heavy, each one requiring careful placement to ensure the wall's stability. But the work proceeds with the easy cooperation of men who have known each other since childhood. Your neighbor brings news from his recent trip to Athens, where he sold surplus grain in the Agora and attended a session of the assembly. The city is debating new measures to strengthen the navy. He reports preparations for potential conflicts with rival city-states who envy Athens' prosperity and power. There is talk of new trade agreements with colonies in Sicily and southern Italy, arrangements that could open new markets for Attic olive oil and wine. This news affects you directly, though the connection might not be obvious to outside observers. The security of your farm depends on Athens' ability to defend her territory and trade routes. The price you receive for your oil and wine depends on the city's success in negotiating favorable trading relationships. The peace that allows you to work your fields without fear depends on the strength of the military forces that your taxes help support and your sons help staff. But unlike the helots of Sparta, you are not merely affected by these policies. You help to shape them. When the planting is finished and the pressing is done, you too will make the journey to Athens to participate in the assembly, to hear the arguments for and against proposed legislation, to cast your vote according to your best understanding of what will benefit the city and its citizens. This is both a privilege and a burden, requiring you to think beyond your immediate interests to consider the common good. The wall repair completed, the afternoon turns to other maintenance tasks that keep a farm running smoothly. Tools must be sharpened and repaired, wooden handles smoothed and oiled, metal edges honed to maintain their effectiveness. These tasks have their own meditative quality, requiring attention to detail, but allowing the mind to wander, to process the day's experiences and plan for tomorrow's work. Your youngest son works beside you, learning through observation and practice the skills that have been passed down through generations of farmers. He is too young yet to understand the political dimensions of the life he is inheriting, but he is absorbing the deeper lessons that will serve him well, regardless of what the future brings: the value of patient work, the satisfaction of self-sufficiency, the importance of maintaining relationships with neighbors and community. As evening approaches, the pace of work gradually slows, matching the lengthening shadows and the cooling air that signals the end of another day. The olive harvest is nearly complete, the baskets full of fruit that will soon be transformed into the oil. That represents your family's contribution to the great commercial network that connects Athens to the wider Mediterranean world. The evening meal is taken in the small courtyard of your farmhouse, under the open sky where the first stars are beginning to appear. The conversation has a different quality now, relaxed and reflective, touching on the small satisfactions and minor concerns that make up the texture of daily life. Your wife speaks of plans for the winter months, of cloth to be woven and repairs to be made to the house. Your father tells stories of past harvests, of years when the crop failed, and years when it exceeded all expectations. These stories serve multiple purposes. They entertain, certainly, but they also transmit the accumulated wisdom of generations, teaching through narrative the patterns and cycles that govern agricultural life. Your children listen with the attention of those who know they are hearing lessons they will someday need to apply, learning not just facts, but ways of thinking about the relationship between human effort and natural forces. As full darkness settles over the countryside, the sounds of night begin to assert themselves. But these are not the threatening sounds that might alert a Spartan krypteia to danger. They are the comfortable sounds of a peaceful rural community settling into rest. A dog barking in the distance, the soft murmur of voices from neighboring farms, the rustle of small animals going about their nocturnal business. The contrast with life in Sparta could not be more complete. Here, there are no helots working in fearful servitude, no perioikoi walking the careful line between usefulness and vulnerability, no young warriors moving through darkness on missions of surveillance and terror. Instead, there is the simple but profound satisfaction of a life lived in harmony with natural rhythms, of work that serves both individual family needs and community prosperity, of citizenship that carries both rights and responsibilities. This is not to say that life as an Athenian farmer is without challenges or uncertainties. The weather can destroy a year's work in a single storm. Markets can fluctuate, making one year's abundance barely sufficient to cover the next year's needs. Wars can disrupt trade, call away sons and husbands, threaten the very survival of the community. Disease can strike crops, animals, or people with devastating effect. But these challenges are met with resources that would be inconceivable under the Spartan system. When difficulties arise, neighbors help neighbors, sharing both labor and resources to ensure that individual misfortunes do not become community disasters. When public issues require attention, citizens gather to debate solutions, bringing together the collective wisdom of the community to address problems that no individual could solve alone. The political dimension of this life extends beyond mere participation in government to encompass a broader understanding of human dignity and potential. Your children are being raised with the expectation that they will think for themselves, form their own opinions, contribute their own insights to the ongoing conversation that shapes Athenian society. They are learning not just agricultural skills, but the intellectual tools necessary for effective citizenship in a democratic state. As you prepare for sleep, lying on your simple but comfortable bed in the farmhouse that has sheltered your family for generations, you experience a satisfaction that goes beyond the physical tiredness that comes from honest labor. You have spent the day contributing to your family's welfare, your community's prosperity, and your city's strength. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and new opportunities, but you will meet them as a free citizen of a free city, with rights and responsibilities that make you a partner in shaping your own destiny. The dreams that come are not filled with the shadows and tensions that haunt those who live under systems of oppression and control. Instead, they carry the peaceful rhythms of agricultural life, the satisfaction of work well done, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your place in a community that values your contributions and respects your dignity. These are the dreams of someone who lives not in fear, but in hope, not as a subject, but as a citizen, not as a cog in someone else's machine, but as a human being with a right and responsibility to help guide the course of his own society. In the deepest hours of sleep, when individual consciousness merges with the larger rhythms of life itself, you rest in the knowledge that your existence has meaning beyond mere survival, that your work contributes to something larger than yourself, that your voice matters in the ongoing conversation that shapes the future of your community and your children. This is perhaps the greatest gift that democracy offers, not just the right to participate in government, but the deeper satisfaction of living as a complete human being in a society that recognizes and nurtures human potential. Conclusion. As dawn breaks over the hills of Attica, painting the olive groves in shades of gold and silver, we complete our journey through the contrasting worlds of ancient Greece. We have walked with the helot through his careful day of survival, felt the weight of generations pressing down like the Mediterranean sun. We have stood with the perioikoi craftsman as he shaped bronze and dreams with equal care, navigating the narrow space between usefulness and invisibility. We have moved through darkness with the young krypteia, carrying secrets and wielding power that transforms both hunter and hunted. And finally, we have tasted the simple satisfaction of the Athenian farmer, working his own land under his own sky, free to speak his mind and shape his destiny. These lives, separated by mere miles, but connected by the great human story of survival and adaptation, remind us that history is not just the chronicle of kings and battles, but the accumulated experiences of ordinary people finding ways to live with dignity under whatever circumstances they encountered. The helot who maintained his humanity in the face of systematic oppression, the craftsman who found pride in his work despite his precarious position, the young warrior struggling with the moral complexities of his duty, the farmer who participated in humanity's first great experiment with democracy. All of them faced the fundamental challenge of being human in a world that often seemed designed to crush the human spirit. Yet they endured. They found ways to love, to hope, to create, to dream. They passed down stories, skills, and wisdom to their children. They left traces of their presence that echo down through the centuries, reminding us that the essential human experience transcends the political systems that try to contain and define it. As you settle into your own rest tonight, carried by these ancient voices toward peaceful sleep, remember that you too are part of this great continuing story. The challenges you face, the choices you make, the small acts of kindness and courage that fill your days, these too will become part of the vast tapestry of human experience that future generations will inherit. Sleep well, fellow traveler through time. Dream of olive groves and bronze workshops, of sunrise over marble temples and moonlight on stone walls. Rest in the knowledge that the human capacity for endurance, adaptation, and hope has carried us through far darker times than these, and will carry us through whatever challenges tomorrow may bring. The ancient Greeks believed that sleep was the brother of death, but also the cousin of dreams. Tonight, may your dreams carry you not to endings, but to beginnings, not to the finality of what was, but to the infinite possibility of what might yet be. The helots and craftsmen, the warriors and farmers who walked with us tonight, they too once lay down to sleep as you do now, carrying their own hopes and fears into the darkness, trusting that morning would come again, that life would continue, that their stories would somehow matter. And they do. They have. They will. Rest now, knowing that you too are part of this endless story, this patient accumulation of human experience that we call history. Close your eyes and let the gentle rhythms of the past carry you toward whatever peaceful dreams await in the quiet hours before dawn.